Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Friends of Mortgage Heroes. I'm Andy.
I'm Will.
And I'm Peter.
So today we have Peter Carlseen with us from Praecelsus Property Management. So Peter and I have actually known each other for quite some time in a variety of different aspects in real estate and networking. And today he's going to talk to us about property management here in Chula Vista, South Bay, San Diego in general, but also I have some questions about some of the property management rules, some things about tenants and landlords. I know we've heard a couple of interesting stories from some other guests, so we're going to get into all that today.
Yeah, we're totally excited to understand another side of our field, especially, since we actually invest in properties too. Want to know more about what your world looks like.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about what is it that you do when you got into the industry and what made you get into the industry, Peter?
Of course, yeah. So I've been in the industry now for almost 20 years.
Wow.
Started 2004. And I got into it because I'm second generation in the business.
Nice.
And took over a small portfolio of properties of about 20 homes. And we've grown that to, we're at about 230 doors now.
Is that it?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Just 230.
230 headaches.
Just a nice 11X.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So 20.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. And I got into it at a time in real estate where everything else was booming. Everything else was going, and the agents were looking down going, oh, you're doing property management. Oh, yeah, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And now the last couple of years, everyone's like, gosh, I got to get into property management.
Yeah, property management looks sweet.
You know what? You're right. So 2004, I remember that. That's
Yeah.
when home prices started
gangbusters.
peaking. So I'm sure everybody was trying to get you into real estate, right, Peter?
Yeah.
Like, why are you doing property management? You should actually be selling homes,
Yeah.
make the real money. But here you are now making the real money, and we're not.
Wow, 230 doors. Wow. So, okay, so you went from 20 to 230. So, wait, okay, you said second generation. So who is the first generation?
So
Mom,
first generation
dad?
is my dad.
Okay.
He started
Nice.
working with Corky McMillan as an advisor, and then he got into real estate.
Oh, wow.
Because, he wanted to invest in real estate.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so first of all, I
Corky
didn't know.
who? I haven't heard that name in
Haven't heard that
a
name in
long time.
Yeah, so first of all, I didn't know you were second generation, so that's new to me. And then I didn't know that your father, of course, then with Corky McMillan. So for those of you watching who are new to the show or either to the area, McMillan is one of the largest developers down here of Eastlake, Otay Ranch, Bonita, Chula Vista.
Yeah.
You name it. They have had land down here and for many decades.
Yeah, they're the reason why we see all this, everything that's happening in our backyard.
Yeah.
All that growth. I remember back in the day, I mean, you've been in the industry 20 years. So back in the day, it was just like a two-way street. That's the way we got to Mexicali or whatever.
Yeah.
Not Mexicali, Tecate.
Yeah.
Right? And now it's I think they're building a private school back there. I mean, so it's grown.
Yeah.
It's grown a lot.
So thanks
So
for sharing
he was
that.
an advisor to Corky McMillan then?
Correct.
Okay,
That's
so
cool.
on the business side, or I mean, on the inner office building, inner office stuff, or like on the building side, the development side, what was kind of his
I don't know all the details. I was
Yeah.
still, kind of a
problem.
youngin' at the time.
That's all right. No, that's okay. But I mean, again, raised up in it, taking over this part of the company, that's super rad.
Sure.
So,
Super.
what I wanted to find out today, partially is because we have known each other quite some time, and we know a lot of the same people in real estate. But one of the things that I think there's a misperception about is, oh well, property management costs. I'd rather just be my own landlord.
Sure.
So there are obviously some. Maybe there is some wisdom in that. Maybe there's some shortcomings in that. So maybe can you talk to us a little about what are some of the things you've experienced in 20 years where that can work out for some people and why? And then for other people, they need a guy like you.
Sure. So what I always tell people is if you're not going to pay a property manager, put that money aside because you're probably going to pay it to an attorney or you're going to be paying it back to the tenant.
Okay.
For one reason or another.
Go down that road. Tell us why.
Sure. Because there are so many laws out there that if a tenant is savvy, they could really take it to the landlord.
Oh, wow.
As a property manager, we're here to make sure everybody plays by the rules.
Yeah.
Everybody's above board. Everybody's playing the way that they're supposed to. And not just, the tenant paying rent, but the landlord maintaining the property and everything getting done the way it's supposed to.
Right.
So we are there as an advocate for the landlord, but we're there as an advocate for the situation in general.
Yeah. So essentially what you're saying is, and I've seen a variety of costs, right? So property management can run between what kind of ranges you say customary for this area we're in?
Customary for this area, you're looking probably between the 7 and 10%.
Right. Of the monthly
Okay.
Of the monthly lease not collected. Yeah.
So you're saying that same equivalent amount of 7 to 10% per month is what they should be saving for some sort of problem to be named later.
To be named later.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Okay.
Plus the headaches.
I've never heard it put that way, but now that you've said it
like
that way, I'm
that.
like, do you know what? That makes a lot of sense.
Sure. Yeah.
So with that, then what are some of the things that are most commonly like alleviated by having a property manager like you? Like
Sure.
I'm going to help with all of these things. What's the value proposition to people?
So I've got clients that live down the street, and I've got clients that are on the other side of the world. And so the technology, the software, the programs that we use allow us to work with people in all of those situations. The main thing is we want to make sure that the property is marketed well, that we're getting good people in there that qualify. We're not violating fair housing laws, because you violate a fair housing law, you say something wrong in the ad, that's a $50,000 fine.
Wait, what? In the ad? Wait, in the ad?
So
like a Craigslist ad or like a Facebook Marketplace ad or something.
it can get expensive.
Okay, hold on. Explain. Tell us more.
The best way to put it is there's a lot of things that you can and cannot say in an ad.
Okay.
And there's rules that you can and cannot use when you go to qualify somebody to rent your property. And if you are violating fair housing law, you could be in big trouble. And there's a lot of there's some gray areas. We try to stay away from any gray area.
Wow.
We navigate the minefield that is the laws out there.
Wow.
And we want to make sure that the landlord, all of his risk is mitigated as best as possible.
Yeah.
To me, $50,000 sounds a lot more than 7 to 10% a month. I'd rather not have that problem.
Just one incident.
How many months of saving that 7 to 10% would you need to equate $50,000?
That's
Only if you're good at
crazy.
math.
Only
Yeah.
if you're good at oh my gosh, that's
Wow.
crazy. So have you had someone who had that problem and come to you and go, hey, kind of had this issue, accidentally violated this fair housing. Can you
I have
please be
not.
my guy now?
No, I haven't had it to that extreme.
Got it.
But anecdotally, I've heard the horror stories.
Yeah. So in this value set for having a property manager, that's part of it, right? You're mentioning the distance and having some people who are close, people who are far away, making sure you don't step on any landmines, get yourself in trouble. Sorry, I cut you off about that thing,
good.
but keep going.
So contracts, we want to make sure that we're compliant with all the laws. Single-family homes that are not owned by corporations can be exempted from the California Tenant Protection Act. That gives the landlord more flexibility when it comes to rent caps and just cause terminations.
Yeah.
And if they don't exclude the property in the lease agreement, the property is not excluded. So even though it could be excluded, it's not if they don't claim that exclusion.
Okay, pit stop there. Go back and explain that, because I just learned that literally 2 days ago. So I did not know that. I didn't know you were going to bring it up, but I just learned that because the assumption is that you are going to have to basically pay the tenant to leave, and then you have to pay their moving expense, then pay for them to find another place if you have to evict them. But you're saying that's not the case if the owner or the landlord holds it personally. Is that correct?
That's correct, if
Okay.
you use the right terminology.
So clean that up for me and for everyone watching.
Sure. So the Tenant Protection Act went into effect January 1, 2020. It's statewide. It was meant to affect multifamily properties older than 15 years old.
Okay.
However, by default, it applies to everybody unless they claim the exemption with the word for word, symbol for symbol verbiage that's required by the law. So if you don't claim the exemption, you're subject to the rent cap, which is currently 5% plus CPI, not to exceed 10%. Mm-hmm. And you're also subject to the limitations on just cause terminations, relocation allowance of one or 2 months, depending on the situation.
Yeah.
And there are certain reasons why you may not be able to terminate a lease. So you want to make sure you're claiming that. And if you go out onto Office Depot or LegalZoom or get one of these off-the-shelf lease agreements, it's not going to have the correct verbiage in there.
Wow.
And and that may not affect you. But
Wow.
it very well might affect you.
Yeah.
And if it does, then that could be a problem. And not to, make it sound worse, but now Chula Vista has their tenant protection ordinance. The city of San Diego has their tenant protection ordinance. And those relocation costs are higher.
Yeah, that's what I was hearing.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Okay, so then that makes someone have to make the decision. Okay, do I want to hold this property as personal or as a entity separate from my personhood, if you will? Sure. But then does that even leave a corporate veil at all in this situation or not? So how do you guide someone to make a choice one way or the next? It seems to me like a fork in the road, and there's risk on both sides.
So if it's in an LLC and the LLC is owned by a natural person, and I mean that like is not a corporation, but if it's an LLC or trust, they can have the same protections.
Okay.
As long as a corporation is not involved in that entity ownership.
Wow.
Got it. Okay. Wow.
This is just crazy.
Oh my gosh. Okay, there's another yet again another nuance on the show. Like, oh, I did not know that part or didn't hear that part before.
Yeah.
Explain that way. That's super helpful. So
Yeah, and the other thing you mentioned is a rate cap. So, like ordinary person like myself, I could just be like, well, I think my house is actually I'm got to rent it right now for $3,000. Maybe I just want to rent out for $3,800 because I think I can, right? So, all of a sudden I'm beyond the 10%, and legally, if the tenant is savvy enough, that I'm violating the law right there in itself.
You could have some problems.
Right?
Yeah, then you gotta deal with rent
50,000. Would that be a
abatement and legal-
$50,000 problem?
I'm not an attorney, so I can't answer that question.
wow, he's really good at property management. I feel like he's like I already got that one loaded. I got that
No.
answer locked and loaded permanently.
Yeah. And those are things that a lot of us don't understand. We just think, oh, we could just go ahead and rent, or we can kick somebody out just for whatever reason. But that's not the case. There's these tenant rule protection acts that are in place for them for reasons, especially here in California.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of those came into effect because there were some scummy landlords, and the bad apple ruins the bunch, and unfortunately, that's kind of why we see ourselves in this situation, and they're going to continue to push these types of things down the road too. So if landlords are not continually savvy and up to date on what's happening this month, this year, next year, they could find themselves in similar situations, similar problems.
So people watching this now that are already in a situation where they don't know if they aren't, are those things you can advise them on from your position if they're not your client and you're trying to maybe give them guidance? Is that something that you can speak to or like draw the line? Go, I can talk about these things and give you advice, but I can't talk about these things. You need a real estate attorney for that.
Yeah, I'm always happy to sit down with people, and if they have a copy of their lease agreement, we can go through it and I can tell them where the deficiencies are. I can't give legal advice. I can't give tax advice. However, I can show them, where they might be deficient and some potential ways to remedy that. But there's not always remedies for all of these situations.
Oh yeah,
So
I can imagine.
You got to do it right the first time in some of these.
Oh, wow.
How difficult, kind of switching gears a little bit here, but if I'm a first-time renter, at least with us, there, when you're in the mortgage industry, there's first-time home buyers. There's got to be first-time renters, right? What kind of requirements does that consist to get somebody in that?
So if you're looking to rent a property, it's going to be different across the board. For my company, we generally have set minimum credit requirements.
Okay.
FICO score is usually minimum 675. Sometimes it'll be lower depending on the property and location. Sometimes higher. Usually at least 2.5 times the rent and income and documented income. And if people have Section 8 or other housing vouchers, then that can offset or eliminate the income requirement.
Gotcha.
But pet policies. If you're a new tenant, try not to have a bunch of pets.
I've seen that.
That'll take a third or 50% of the properties off the market for you.
Wow. Wow. And that mostly, from my experience, correct me if I'm totally wrong here, but that has just a lot to do with insurance and risk, right?
Yeah.
Not just damage to the property only, but, it's really usually I see it's a dog thing. Is it mostly a dog thing, or are people trying to lock like camels into their house?
I've never seen a camel.
All right,
Dogs, cats, snakes.
Yeah.
What is the most weird animal you had someone put on a rental app?
I haven't had anything too crazy.
Okay,
No.
that's good. No, like no like
camels.
Brazilian anaconda. You're like, sorry, no 30-foot snakes in the house. Should have put that in the ad. Oh, we can't put that in the ad. That's a fine.
Yeah. You know what's pretty crazy is Peter's mentioning credit score, income docs.
All this.
It's pretty much everything you need to do to get qualified for a home purchase too. You know what I mean?
It's a lot of the same stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so I wrote down here the 2.5 times the you need 2.5 times the rent for income. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a DTI.
Hello.
It sounds like
Yeah.
a straight up a debt to income ratio as far as cost to income. But so that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. So, when you're doing these rental contracts for people, they have these sometimes first-time renters. They might be a little more harder to qualify because they are maybe younger or they just moved here or whatever the reason might be. Have you noticed kind of like a sweet spot? So if there's landlords listening right now or future property investors or current investors, like, is there a sweet spot where you just know that this is going to just probably work out?
It changes all the time. I mean, as the market shifts, as the market evolves, one year to the next, it can be different. I will say, depending on where you're at, out here in the suburbs in East Lake and East Chula Vista, the 3 and 4 bedroom homes rent like mad. If you go downtown San Diego, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments rent much better.
Got it.
If you go into, Kearny Mesa, again, you're kind of back to that suburban 3-bedroom, even the 2-bedroom condo stuff, but a studio out here or a 1-bedroom out here, not always kind of what people are looking for. People are looking for that type of product. They're looking in a different location.
A different part of town. Okay. That's
So the area/environment does make a difference depending on that home. So if you're having a large home, a 3,000, 4-bedroom, 5-bath in downtown, it's gonna probably take a little longer to rent. But if it was over here in Eastlake, probably because it's more family oriented and stuff, it's got it.
If you can move that to Mission Hills, you might be a little bit better off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, that makes sense. So are you seeing that obviously in San Diego, we've had a lot of demand for every type of shelter, okay? So, as far as supply is concerned, do we need more rental units on the market? Do we need less? What's your opinion on that?
So that's a great question. And we always do need more rental. We need more purchase property. We are in an overall housing shortage in San Diego. There's only so much dirt out there to move. There's only so much that can get built. And that's part of the reason why we're seeing prices escalate so much. I mean, year over year, last month was over a 12% increase in median house price for San Diego.
Yeah.
So, the rental market will continue to kind of track along with that. So,
we've been seeing like the new gold rush is ADUs, additional dwelling units. Is that something that your company also participates in making sure that they rent? For instance, somebody converted their garage, right, into a 1-bedroom and they're departing the residence because they just want to keep it. They have a low interest rate. Is that something that you guys will also manage?
Yeah, we can do that. Here's a couple words of caution, though. They got to make sure that everything is done up to code. This DIY, I did the drywall, I did the electrical, I did the plumbing. That's red flags. I'm not even going to go there.
Wow. Okay.
But then also, too, it's going to affect your client mix. If somebody's looking to rent out a 1-bedroom or a studio ADU that's behind somebody's house or above the garage or in place of the garage, it's going to be a different clientele perhaps than what might be looking for something downtown. If someone's looking for a 1-bedroom or a studio, do they want the amenities that maybe a high-rise has or an apartment complex has? So
that's a good point.
There are some challenges. Parking can be a challenge as well, especially if it's on a street where the parking's already a little bit jammed. If they're using if they convert the garage, then where's the homeowner parking?
Right,
they're parking on the street. Then you got to have the other person parking on the street. It can congest things a little bit. So there's some logistics.
Put the car in the grass.
Put the car
Don't say that.
Put it in the grass. Just put it up on the blocks.
One thing you mentioned, Peter, was permits, right? We know so many homes over here in the area, and we've appraised several of them. They have this ginormous home, but then like 1,000 square feet isn't permitted. What happens in that situation? Like if there was a fire or something and you're managing that home, I don't even know if insurance companies will even cover something like that.
Yeah, I couldn't speak to that on a specific level. I haven't, luckily, knock on wood, I haven't had to deal with that. But yeah, that is an issue. I mean, it could definitely be an issue. If somebody's got an unpermitted addition and there's an issue, there's a problem, I would not want that liability.
Got it.
So that's definitely one of the things that we ask our clients is what's permitted, what's not. Is it within our risk tolerance?
Yeah.
We advise a client, hey, this may not be good, or get somebody out here to confirm everything's set up. But.
So tell me. So I'm curious to hear from you from a firsthand experience. Like, tell me something that has just been like super odd, where maybe a landlord had some specific request, and you're like, oh, that's different. It kind of made you go, oh, that's different. Like, what's something that might be just a little bit off the range, just a little bit, where you're like, oh, I've never heard that before.
Unfortunately, I can't say I've never heard it before, but I do have.
Because it's weird, and I have a lot of them.
Happens often.
I deal with a lot of different people that have a lot of different preferences, that have a lot of different, clean to me means this. Good tenant to me means this. So there's a lot out there. But I'd say as far as landlords go, I did have one client who was military who did not want to rent to military.
Oh, really?
They did not want to include the military clause, which is part of the Service Member Civil Relief Act. So if somebody gets transferred or a change of orders, then they're allowed to leave. That's federal law.
Right.
And they did not want to honor.
I have never heard that before. Have you ever heard that?
No.
I've never heard that. I mean, so we hear the opposite. If we're going to buy a house with our VA because when we PCS out of here, someone's PCSing right in, and we'll just pop them right in. Okay, that's the first time I've ever heard. I mean, look, we've been together since 2005. That's the first time I've ever heard that in 18 years.
That's
Okay.
crazy. So that's a special clause that is there for military. So in case, can a lease be broken with that?
A lease can be broken. It's a 30-day notice that goes into effect the first of the following month upon receipt of orders.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
written notice. So
Well, I can understand. I guess I can understand why. I mean, think of the
Sure.
situation, the circumstance that might require you got to pop out 100 people out of San Diego and their tenants. But again, in our demand saturated environment, I can't imagine it would be hard to plug someone in. But I also reserve the respect to the person you're talking about. That was their own choice.
Sure.
So I can understand that.
But wow. So okay. So for somebody, I'm in the military. I'm locked in for a year contract or lease agreement, right? And it's like month 6, and I get orders to deploy. Can I cancel my lease agreement at that point in time?
if your deployment's at least 180 days and it's taking you at least, I think it's like 60 or miles or something like that out of the area, then yeah, you can terminate the lease. Again, with a 30-day notice, it becomes effective on the first of the following month. Same thing with car leases. If you need
Got
to get
it.
out of a car lease, you can do the same thing.
Really? I didn't know that. That's actually
Learned 2
great.
new things today.
Yeah.
Two new
we're not
things
done.
right now. I'm like 5 new things so far.
Yeah, because a lot of times they get deployed, right, for like 8 months.
Yeah.
And so that actually a lot of times probably could say allows them to save some money because they would just put everything in storage. I'll have to break that lease because I don't have nobody to fill in.
Yeah.
Or
that's
let's
right.
say sometimes they probably say, oh, I'm going to get a friend to fill in, but then they make holes because we don't know, if they're partiers or anything. And now they're violating the lease in that sense, right?
Yeah, so as a landlord, you got to make sure you're playing by all the right rules.
Man.
Wow.
Yeah, see, I didn't even know that. I mean, it's so you guys are talking about this, and I'm listening. I'm thinking, how many people don't know this? If we don't know this, how is so many people may not even know this? Okay, so keep going. Something that's like unique or different. Can you give me an example? Something where you're like, wow, that is really just off, or something weird that happened to a property. We've heard some kind of interesting stories here about what people have done with properties.
Yeah.
Can I tell you about a bomb squad incident?
Geez,
Yes,
tell us.
absolutely.
So it turned out to be nothing. So spoiler alert.
Okay. And thank you for joining us.
No, we were doing a termite tenting at a property.
Okay.
And part of the termite tenting, and the tenant was military away. So he said, hey, can you go in there and make sure I don't have any food that needs to be boxed? No problem. Go in there, go into the freezer, and there were these metal rods that were just in the freezer, and it looked really, really suspicious.
Wow.
So we ended up calling the Chula Vista Police Department.
What?
Bomb squad came out. News was there. It was
The news. That
Okay.
must have been fun.
There's rods in the freezer. What was it actually? Don't tell me these were like, lime green Otter Pops.
no, there was copper tubing.
Okay.
It was used for a homemade air conditioning.
Get
Oh my-
the heck
come
out
on.
of
You know,
here.
You'd put them in like
Yeah. But okay, so what did it? Oh my gosh. Okay.
That's crazy. Do you have a picture? No.
Did they come out like they had the whole like the bomb squad?
Yeah,
they
yeah,
come
they
in
had
the
the whole bomb-
gear.
yeah.
They have to. They
They
have
had
to
the
assume.
robot out there, and
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
They go in there like, oh look, it's just ice cream drumsticks.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
it wasn't just outer pops.
Okay, so to this point in your career, it sounds like maybe there has not been a lot of incidents. That's good.
My mantra is no drama.
No drama.
All
Okay.
right? I've got 4 kids at home. Most of them are teenagers or were recently teenagers.
Yeah.
No drama. That's
Oh,
I don't want
man.
any extra.
That's really
you get
good.
Plenty already.
Yeah.
And every week there's something new.
Yeah.
We learn something every week. We come across something new every week. So
Well, and I'm learning right now, and I've known this about you pre-show, anyways. But it's just like I know you're always in evolution, right? You're not doing something for 20 years, and you're doing your first year for the 20th time. But I also know that there are some new things coming on the horizon. I mean, is there something that already you're putting your eyes on for the next year, 2, 3 years that people should be aware of now if they are already landlords or they're considering being landlords and having property management? What are some things they should be readying themselves for?
great question. So I would say the number one thing you want to do is make sure you know what's coming up on the elections.
Really?
So
Okay.
November next year, there's a big initiative that's going on, but there's always going to be a lot of things that affect landlords. The Costa Hawkins Act was introduced decades ago, and that prevents single-family homes from being subject to rent control. The last few years, there have been continual propositions out there statewide to repeal the Costa Hawkins Act.
Gotcha.
And unfortunately, a lot of those things, if that happens, that could negatively impact supply of rental property, and therefore making the supply-demand imbalance even worse.
Really?
Which will then increase prices to tenants.
So is this something that so it'd be like a local ballot thing, or I think it's like a state? It's a state thing. Okay,
it's a state
and it's called Costa Hawkins.
Costa Hawkins. Yeah.
Costa Hawkins Act.
Yes.
Okay, and this is already on the ballot for November.
So the Costa Hawkins Act is already in place.
Okay.
But there is an initiative coming up in November that seeks to remove the Costa Hawkins protections of single family.
To remove it. Okay, got it. So make sure I understand. Make sure that's watching this understands.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else that's kind of like on your radar that you're like, oh, we should watch out for this?
Jeez.
I'm just always looking from the legal side, looking at all of the initiatives that are trying to pass. They tried to pass rent control in National City a few years ago with Prop W. That barely got defeated. But a lot of these things can negatively impact tenants. And it's spun
Of course.
as, hey, this is going to make everything perfectly great for tenants and those horrible landlords that are so greedy. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, what ends up happening is it makes situations worse.
Wow.
And we want to, going back to what I initially said, part of what I do is I am here to protect the integrity of the situation.
Yeah.
I want the tenant to be happy. I want the landlord to be happy because I want no drama.
Yeah.
And a lot of these things really pit people against each other. And it's really imperative that owners and landlords, we call them rental housing providers now. They're not landlords because that's a scary term.
I use it all the time.
So we want to make sure that, stay up to date on what's happening.
Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
stay involved in the local and state policies that are coming down.
So would you say that that's what sets you apart from a lot of competitors?
I think that's one of the things. There's some great property managers in the San Diego area. And I network with a lot of them. And really, we want to try to make sure that we're upping each other's game because we want to, number one, provide great service. We want to make sure that our clients are well taken care of.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that rental housing is still a viable investment instrument for people that want to have that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's important. I think that can go, to your point, I think that can go overlooked a lot. There is a housing need in San Diego, good housing, safe housing, affordable housing, and that does come at the decision of it comes at the hands of the decision makers. If someone's going to buy a house, they can either live in it or they can make it available for rent. And I do think a lot of that times that gets overlooked because, like you mentioned earlier in the show, the bad apple can ruin the bunch.
Sure.
And sometimes when the bad apple ruins the bunch, rules change, and that changes what it looks like for people, and it might be more pressure and more difficult for the tenant side. But I have to also say, there's a legitimate reason and value for there to be the housing that there is available for people to rent if they can't afford to buy or if they can't get the credit to qualify to buy or whatever their circumstances is that they don't need to buy a home. So let's not let that go overlooked. Not everyone wants to, right? Yeah. I just think, so I think it's just it feels to me that sometimes it's such a tilted conversation like you're kind of referring to, right? Yeah. The landlords are greedy. Oh, I said the landlord word. Landlords are greedy. It's like, well, they don't have to rent to you either. Yeah. Like I could be living there. I don't have to rent it to you. But
so I find this, I want to ask this question because it is second generation. You got it from your dad. Most people don't want that same business. They see their dad like, I'm stressed out on this. What made you want to take over and say, hey, let's continue this legacy going with, what my dad has built?
The honest answer?
Please.
I was dumb.
Okay.
No.
First time on the show, someone's
right?
like, I was dumb.
Yeah, there you go. The truth matters.
No. There was an opportunity to take that on. And I was coming off of, some entrepreneurial ventures and it looked like a good idea. And it has been a good idea.
Yeah. Good.
But it's definitely pushed me out of my comfort zone every day, every week.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah.
And I can imagine you have to encounter situations where maybe the conversations are not as comfortable or not as friendly or not as, they're just tense. They're just tense because they're tense.
That's right. Yeah. Situations come up and some of those conversations are not comfortable. Sometimes they're with the residents. Sometimes they're with the property owners.
Got it.
Sometimes they're with vendors.
What would you say is one of your most uncomfortable conversations that you can say, hey, I want to try to avoid this at all cost?
Most of the conversations that I have when I have to terminate a lease.
Gotcha.
And I know it is, knowing the resident for years, I know the impact that it's going to have on them. It's my least favorite, one of my least favorite things to do. And without going into specifics, just say that, having to terminate a lease, having to tell somebody, I know you hate moving and I know you moved here so that you would never have to move again.
Yeah.
But you got to move in 60 days or 90 days or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
I can see that you put your heart, you wear your heart in your sleeve, huh?
Yeah.
I can tell that. And I like that, because I can tell it's hard for you to even have this discussion with that.
Yeah. He could have told the story that was like, oh, it's massively inconvenient for me as a professional, but that's not what you're telling. It's personal.
No. You can tell, I mean, Peter, you're having a hard time saying it. You know what I mean? I can tell. And I'm glad, because that's what we built, our Mortgage Heroes is. We try to wear our hearts on our sleeves, all these things matter. So displacing people is not a fun thing.
Yeah. And telling people no is hard, and telling people they don't qualify is challenging. And, there's a road ahead of you that looks like that. I mean, it's tough. Yeah. There are hard conversations, but that's also why you are in a profession, and with that profession brings some of these things. So.
And that's the time that you say, "Hey, I'm done for taking over my dad's business." Huh?
and this is also full circle. This is back where that 7 to 10% comes into play. Like that's what you have guys like Peter for, is to do those things when there's a situation that is maybe untenable or is not going to get fixed, not going to change for the betterment, for the better, and you have to make those tough conversations.
So now that you're second generation, what do you see with your kids? You mentioned you have 4 kids. Are these teens now, adults, thinking, hey, I think I want to take over my dad's business here?
So my kids are pretty smart, okay?
Nice.
My oldest just turned 21.
Okay.
And they have zero desire to do that.
I say the same because I got 5 kids, and I'll tell you, none of them have told me like, Dad, I really want to go do what you do, because they see that we come home and we have our issues too, right? Like it's... full disclosure, they actually see the full disclosure.
They do. That's right.
They do.
But that being said, when I was in high school, I was doing transaction coordinating for my dad in real estate.
In high school?
In high school.
Oh, wow.
It was much better than Taco Bell.
Wow.
That's true. I mean,
it was
that's
a huge
true.
step up.
That's true.
Went from 425 an hour. But anyways, so after doing that for like 6 months, I said, I swear, there is no way I'm ever going into real estate.
Wow.
Ever.
I saw enough.
And 7 years later, I'm in the business, and then I'm a broker, and so you just never know.
You're not just in the business; you were in the trenches.
Yeah, you're in the trenches, man. So you got 230 doors. You've been doing this for 20 years. You have San Diego got owners all over the world. Who without saying a name, how many properties do you manage for? What's the most amount of properties you manage for one person or entity?
So currently, I've got a 17 unit that I manage, 17 unit building, and I'm looking to bring on a client that's got 35 rental units.
Oh,
okay.
Dang.
Look at that.
35? Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
If you do the math, that's a nice retirement right there. Nice residual income.
Well, I quickly went from 35 from 230. I'm like, that's like a 15% jump just like right out the bat like that. Wow. 15% aggregate growth. That's crazy.
Yeah. But I've got a great staff. I've got
That's awesome.
Great team members, and that makes it much easier.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's awesome.
That's really impressive.
So 20 years in the industry now, seeing the new shift in our market, the economy, where do you see the housing heading into?
Prices are just going to continue to go up. There's going to continue to be a supply-demand imbalance. There's the economy in San Diego locally. It's strong with the military. It's strong with biotech. It's strong with technology.
Yeah.
It's strong with the cross-border opportunities there. So it's going to continue to be good. It's going to continue to be strong. And I don't see any change in that. I see that there may be a net decline in single-family homes, especially if some of these government regulations get passed. It's going to frustrate people from wanting to have rental properties. But I think overall it's going to still be a very strong, high-demand product.
Well, doesn't that just, carrying that idea forward, doesn't that just displace those folks into some sort of like multi-unit,
Yes.
like a 35 unit or something like that?
Yeah, or a 300 unit or an 800 unit. Or
800.
Yeah, you got these mega complexes in Mission Valley, and they got one out here in Otay.
I know, like Savita and all that. Like,
It's crazy. So moving forward, what is your goal? Like, how many homes do you actually want to manage and have in your portfolio of management?
So my end of year 2024 goal is 300 units.
Nice.
And,
wow.
I've got a 10-year projection of 700, but I may have to adjust that up a little bit.
Wow. Well, if you land a 35-unit complex right away, you're already like, that's already got you real close to your goal. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Good for you. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I know that sometimes there's attrition as well. You got to kind
There's
of
always attrition.
account for that. But even if your attrition is 10%, that's still totally make upable in a year where you're landing a 35-unit deal. That's amazing. Congratulations on that.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So people who are watching this and they are either already landlords and need to make a move, what's the best way for them to reach you? How do you want to be reached by anyone who's watching this, who needs to ask you questions, who needs help, who needs to hire you right away? Let's get them the information they need.
Great question. So you can always call me directly on my cell phone. I'm still small enough to where I can take the direct calls, 619-370-6555.
Nice.
Okay.
You can also check out our website. It's www.praehomes.com, spelled PRAEHOMES.com. And my office is just right here in Eastlake. So
Awesome.
we're local, and we'd love to help people out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And phone number and website will be in the description box of the show. But
I was almost very tempted to bleep it out.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm just.
No, it's super helpful. I mean,
Yeah.
I learned several new things on the show today.
Yeah.
Specifically with the military thing. Also, the Costa Hawkins Act. That's very interesting to me. But thank you for sharing a lot of that stuff, because again, we kind of come into this knowing, okay, we're gonna have a conversation about some things, but every single time we do one of these, we learn something brand new about the person. We learn something brand new about the industry. And that helps us learn more, be of more value to our clients, but also to the people that are watching the show. Sure. And I hope that there's great value that came out of this.
Absolutely. Too. I mean, that's why we do these things. We want to make a difference in our community. We want to make a difference in ourselves and just understand this knowledge. So who better to bring in than an expert that is in there in that industry. So we appreciate that you're sharing this information. And I know this encourages people to go out there and say, hey, you know what? Let me combine forces with somebody who is very knowledgeable. So again, Peter, you give them your cell phone. They know where to reach you now. I'll be calling you here soon.
Yeah.
So.
He has like a million text messages already.
All right.
So last question is there anything that we should have asked you but didn't ask you?
There's a lot of things you could have asked me, but I'm glad that you did.
That's good.
No, I think that covers a lot. There's hours and hours of content that I could go off on, but just do the right thing.
Yeah.
Just
do the
all
right
about doing
thing.
the right thing.
That's good.
Thank you. And I think, this is a tribute that as we watch this later, we were going to have more questions come up. And would you be okay with coming once
Always.
again? I love that.
Bring
See?
it on.
We're going to have to pick this one back up because it's already got my gears turned about other things we need to be discussing. So, especially as some of these things change, as they either approach us and become more near, and we need to have advocacy for or against things. But then also, again, when things do change, well, now that matters because there's been now a material change in the reality that we need to inform and educate people about.
Exactly.
So, thank you for spending time today to be with us. Thank you so much for being on the show, you guys. Thank you all
Appreciate
for watching the Friends of Mortgage Hero Show. If you're watching us on YouTube, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you catch every episode. And then if you're listening on Google or Apple, remember to follow the show, but also hit direct download so that every time we upload a new episode, you get it first. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.
See ya.